It's Friday here on the Big Me Kickoff. I am your host, Kevin Noon, and plenty going on. I'm excited. Let's get the logo up there and the site. It is February 17th, and I'll just get right to it. I was sitting around this morning figuring out show prep. What am I going to talk about? There's just not a ton going on at this point without talking about basketball, and I have been told in no uncertain terms by many of our watchers that they are not that interested in talking about the basketball team this year. So moving beyond that, I was going through the Twitters and I saw a post that somebody put up with ESPN.com analyst Todd McShay, NFL draft analyst, talking about Bryce Young and Justin Fields. And we really just can't get enough of talking about the upcoming draft. As you all know, I am a huge fan of the draft process. I really enjoy it, always have. Covered the NFL Combine for at least a dozen years, probably even a little bit more than that. And I can't get enough mock drafts and things of that nature. And I'm going to start off by saying that I'm not being critical of anybody who's doing a mock draft. I certainly have seen good ones. I've certainly seen ones I disagree with. It's a difficult task out there, and it's still a pretty small community of the people that have the ones that everybody reads. I mean, Bubba can go out and put out their own mock draft, and it is what it is. I'm looking at doing my own mock draft. We'll see. I need a little bit of time to put that together, though. I don't want to slap it together because the second you do that, you open yourself open to criticism, and I want to do my due diligence. But with Todd McShay, he is continuing the narrative that has been out there by a few about the Bears with the number one pick needing to take Bryce Young and move away from former Ohio State quarterback Justin Fields. And I have some mixed feelings about that. And hear me out, because I know a lot of Ohio State fans, and this is an Ohio State channel, so I think I know where most people are coming from, are going to be like, what? That's ridiculous. Well, it is. But if you don't have faith in the Bears, maybe the best thing in the world for Justin Fields is to move on. Now, is there going to be some sort of negative black eye that he's going to receive if he gets moved after a couple of years? Maybe. But you know what corrects that? Success. And you know what corrects that as well? Being within a program that is empowering you to be successful. So far, the Bears have not proven to be that organization with their moves as of late. And a lot could change. I mean, the Bears are in a great position. They can move down out of that number one spot, pick up more draft capital. They certainly have money under the salary cap to be able to spend. But if they don't put an emphasis on offensive line and wide receiver, then they're just not serious about being competitive. I mean, in my opinion, they're not taking it seriously enough. Yes, there are other deficiencies on that roster. And I'm not a Bears fan by any stretch of the imagination. I like the Bears. I mean, they're fine. I don't, if I had to sit there and talk about an NFC North team that I like, I guess it would be the Bears. I'm not really down with any of the other teams in the division, but I'm of the mindset that you can have one favorite team. By saying favorite, you need to have one. You can't sit there and say, well, I have a favorite team in every division and in the AFC and in the NFC. So, as I've said, I'm a Cowboys fan. I know. But the further the Cowboys have been from their success, it's get a lot less, oh, you front runner. Well, one, I was never a front runner with it. I liked the Cowboys from a very early age, before I was 10 years old. And now I'm 51. So I've been there for the highs and the lows and the bizarro years that we're in right now. But Todd McShay goes on and says that Bryce Young is just like a mini version of Pat Mahomes, which I don't necessarily see. I don't see that. I'm not taking anything away from Bryce Young. I think that, he wouldn't have won the Heisman the year he did if he wasn't extremely talented. I think we saw what happened when he didn't have the same positional players around him in his most recent year, something that undoubtedly you'd be getting into if you go to Chicago, in my opinion. Because obviously, if Chicago would take Bryce Young one, you're going to pick up draft capital by moving Fields, if that would be the case. But what do you do at that point? I mean, what do you? Okay, well, Bryce Young, he can move around and he can move the pocket and he can run when he needs to. Well, we've seen it out of Justin Fields. I mean, I think year one of Justin Fields in Chicago, we've had 2 years of him. Year one was an abject disaster for him and for everybody involved. We're just gonna sit him back there and have him throw the ball, but we're not going to protect him, and he's going to get freight trained, and he did. He got freight trained at an insane rate. Year two, they finally said, "Well, we're going to run you a little bit. We see some of your natural abilities," and he goes on and he puts up Lamar Jackson type of numbers. I think a lot of it, I mean, from what I saw of Justin Fields covering him at Ohio State, he certainly would like to throw first if the opportunity's there. Is Justin Fields the most accurate passer in the NFL? No, absolutely not. He is not at this point, but he also does not have the same time in protection that a lot of other quarterbacks do. And again, we're talking about the best football players in the world. Sorry, XFL. Sorry, USFL. The best players of this sport are in the National Football League. And I don't think either of the spring leagues would try to say otherwise. But, you're dealing with 53-man rosters across all of these teams. We're talking about the top couple hundred players in several hundred players in the world playing the sport there. So margins become razor thin. Nobody's going to be able to protect a quarterback forever. A quarterback's going to have to be able to process all the information, move off of his first read, look at his second read, third read, whatever it may take. There was a lot of talk that Fields was a single read quarterback when he was at Ohio State. But if we're being honest with ourselves, he was a single read quarterback in some regards because that first read was always open, because of the receivers that he was throwing to, because of the offensive scheme, because of everything else. That's not necessarily going to be the case in the National Football League, as we've seen, but the Bears have not done Fields any favors with the makeup of the roster. And again, I'm much more willing to be critical of professionals than I am of amateurs, even if the line of what an amateur athlete is really blurred now with NIL. I'm not going to be a guy to say, well, this player sucks. I mean, you don't gain anything there. I mean, okay, at the bar, you can sit there and over some beers and wings, sit there and be like, oh yeah, this guy sucks or whatever. But, I'm not going to publicly on a show go out there and the internet's forever. Screenshots are forever, and screen records are forever. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. But the Bears have not surrounded Fields with great options. I don't know why there are people that believe that Bryce Young is going to be able to do a bunch of different things there with the same makeup of the team. Now, again, the Bears have plenty of opportunities to make a lot of moves, and I want to be honest, because we can sit there and go and extrapolate this to the Bengals, and the Bengals had an opportunity a couple years ago to take the best player available at like offensive line because of all the issues that the Bengals had protecting Joe Burrow. Oh, and they go out and they get Jamar Chase. Well, history says Bengals smart, general public dumb on that one, because that one seemed to work out pretty well. Burrow's still probably not getting protected as much as he'd like to, but I think Joe Burrow has elevated himself into that top couple quarterbacks in the league conversation, and I'm really looking forward to seeing a lot more Cincinnati, Kansas City games in future years of Mahomes and Burrow going head-to-head. But back to the point, if you have a situation of where a quarterback is getting abused the way that Chicago quarterbacks have been getting abused, You're going to bring in somebody. Bryce Young may list at 5'11". I call shenanigans on that. I'm going to be very curious to see what the official measurement at the NFL Scouting Combine is going to be. I was at the Heisman ceremony the year that Young won with C.J. Stroud there, and I can tell you there was a significant difference, not only in height, but in build. I mean, and not that C.J. Stroud is all yoked up, and he's not huge that way. He's not huge like a Jared Lorenzen was, or Cardale Jones even. But there was a significant difference in body type. I just don't know how experts can sit there and say, well, don't worry, Bryce Young can sit there and turn the fortunes of the Bears. I'm not convinced of that. I mean, at some point they're going to have to make the right picks, and whether or not outgoing Big Ten Commissioner Kevin Warren, as new team president, is going to be able to get involved in the draft process, with the GM and the owner and everything else. I don't know there, but it really seems foolish to me to move away from a quarterback that was really starting to put some things together before they shut him down. They weren't going to win anything. They were right in the mix for maybe getting the first round or the number 1 overall pick, which they did. But if you saw the growth from year 1 to year 2, what are you going to get from year 2 to year 3 if you sit there and put a couple more guys around him? If you don't have him getting contacted 15 times a game, if you give him more options in terms of players to get open. And again, that's not me saying, well, they need to absolutely draft Jackson Smith-Njigba because there's a history there, and we saw how wide open JSN was in college. Well, that's not going to be the case in the NFL, but obviously we saw Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave continue their success with their respective franchises, with the Jets and with the Saints, having a little bit of proof of performance of what Ohio State has been able to do with wide receivers, continuing on from Terry McLaurin, going back to Michael Thomas. I mean, plenty of other guys, Paris Campbell. I mean, hell, Noah Brown is still kicking it in the league with the Cowboys. Obviously, Ohio State receivers have been able to translate pretty well. And I think that JSN will translate well wherever he goes. But I think it would just be a major mistake for the Bears to get away from Fields at this point. And what is the market right now for that, presumed starting quarterback that, what would the Bears be able to get for him? And that I don't know. And I certainly have some friends at various draft sites. As you remember earlier on the show, I think last week we had Ian Cummings of Pro Football Network on. That's something I should have probably asked. And again, I don't know. I know what he does with player evaluations. I don't know if he would be able to give me an idea of what compensation might be there. But are we saying that Bryce Young is significantly better than Fields? A first-year Bryce Young versus a third-year Justin Fields. A first-year Bryce Young that's going to have to learn what it is to be an NFL player. A first-year Bryce Young that's coming off of a good, not great last season with Alabama. I mean, I don't know. But, again, it has me really thinking about that. We're getting closer to the NFL Scouting Combine. My plan is still to go there. It takes until the last second to be able to hear from the NFL of what's going on there. I think they hit the networks first, and then they hit the independent sites. So, the plan is to be there and to get all the coverage and talk to all of the Buckeyes that are invited and witness what we can. I mean, again, it is not necessarily the greatest spectator event outside of the on-field drills. And we as the media don't necessarily get to go and see that. And really at the same time, a lot of the interviews are happening at other position groups. So at the end of the day, that's what I'm there for. I can DVR the coverage on NFL Network and go and watch it. But I'm really interested in that situation, but I put it on to you guys. What are your thoughts? If you're the Chicago Bears, do you move away from Justin Fields? Do you maybe throw him a lifeline and let him go to another program to where he can go and have, the support around him in terms of the roster? Where does Bryce Young elevate the Bears significantly? And for everything that you can say that Bryce does better than Fields, can you have one thing that Fields does better than Bryce Young? So, I don't know. I don't know on there, but it was kind of, again, one of those situations of came into the day, wasn't really sure what I wanted to talk about. It was a little late to go and find a guest. And it's Friday. I want everybody to be able to quick show to get on with and get into their weekend. Started the XFL this weekend. Who's watching the XFL? I think I might have a little bit of time on Saturday. I'll probably tune in for a little bit, and then Sunday normally would be for watching Daytona 500, but I'm heading to Indianapolis to cover the Best of the Midwest Combine with our Mark Givler. So probably be in the car for part of that. So I probably won't get to see the race. And I certainly have listened to races on MRN, and it's just not really the same. But a lot going on here, but I'm excited about the XFL. I go in with muted expectations, though. We go in hoping that it's going to be, we're just days away from the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is really close in that rearview mirror, and then we go to the XFL. It's like, wow, the difference in the level of play is night and day. Well, yeah, you're dealing with the two best teams, presumably in the National Football League, playing in the Super Bowl, in the World Championship, and then you go to a startup league that probably has not had a lot of time to put things together. You have rosters that, okay, they've gone through whatever their training camp designation is, but they're not going to be sharp. There are a lot of players that either maybe played a little bit in the NFL and just couldn't stay on the 53. A couple of players that were kind of right on the fringe and were final cuts who couldn't get on the 53. Maybe some, taxi squad guys. There is going to be a difference. And I do think that maybe the USFL has a little bit of a better idea by having a little bit more of a pause between the end of the NFL season and the start of their season. Now, I could also say in the other way, the XFL might be doing it right because they're immediately filling that gap. They're immediately filling the gap. And it's like, you want football? We got football. Here you go. But again, it's a situation of going and watching an MLB game and then going and watching, I don't want to denigrate players, but, a double-A game. I mean, there is going to be a bit of a difference there, but that doesn't make it any less fun to follow. I'll be curious to see what The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, has been able to do since acquiring the league and everything else. I'm always a big fan of seeing what type of innovation they try to bring to these spring leagues to either make the coverage experience a little bit better or to maybe try to advance the game, and always wonder what the NFL is keeping an eye on there. I really want spring football to work out. I really do. It's funny. I've always kind of mentioned this. I grew up with baseball being my first love. It was there. It was easy. I grew up in Southern California. The Rams were there. Raiders were still up in Oakland, but we had the Rams. The Chargers were still down in San Diego. Nobody really cared about the Rams. It just wasn't a big deal. And as I said, Vince Ferragamo lived in the same city I did. Again, dating myself. I didn't, I knew that, and I was like, oh, okay, whatever. And, I became a Cowboys fan. It is what it is. But baseball was there. I lived close to Angel Stadium, became immediately a Dodger fan, though. That was it. I mean, because I started watching baseball in 77 and 78 when the Dodgers were going to the series. So it was very easy to make that decision, even though that the Angels had guys like Rod Carew and Nolan Ryan came through town and Reggie Jackson. I mean, I certainly saw a ton of Hall of Famers in Anaheim, but I was a Dodgers fan. But the point being was, baseball was something that was a lot easier for a kid who didn't grow until he was about a senior in high school. It was a sport I was able to play for a couple few years. I was actually really good, and then there's just everybody grew, and I stayed small, and that was that. But football now has become my love, my focus, pretty much at all levels. And the months that we go without the NFL are always long months. And if a spring league is able to get some success, if it's able to draw a bit of viewership, I think that is huge. I would like to see as much cooperation between the NFL and one or two. I mean, however many spring leagues we end up having. I mean, I don't think that there's room for two, if we're being quite honest. Haven't really looked at them closely enough. XFL 3.0 and what the USFL, I guess 2.0, 2.1, whatever. What it has to offer. Who may be left standing, but in order to keep the momentum going, obviously having a couple more months of football to get us into OTAs and training camp and everything else is fantastic. And gives me plenty to talk about. And a couple of Buckeyes are going to be in the USFL. A couple of Buckeyes are going to be in the XFL. I have the list posted over at BuckeyeHuddle.com. But I'm going to try to watch. I'm going to try to watch a little bit. I'll definitely DVR. How about that? I'll DVR it, and when I get back from Indianapolis, be able to check it out. Now, and final point, does the NFL absolutely need a spring league to be able to be successful? No, it's wildly successful on its own. We already talked about it on another show, to the tune of 113 million viewers for the Super Bowl, third most watched television program ever. There's no, in the States, there's no denying that the NFL has got the secret sauce and can just turn ratings like nobody else. And I get it. But if you could keep football front and center 10 months of the year, 11 months of the year, 12 months of the year, isn't that the goal? When you're at the top of the mountain and there's nobody really challenging you, it really shouldn't be a concern about what a spring league is doing. You should be doing what you can to foster the growth of it. We're not going to see a point of where a highly regarded player is going to be coming out of college football and it's like, you know what? I would rather be drafted by the XFL or the USFL. This is not like NFL, USFL, Jim Kelly days or anything like that. That's not going to be the case. So nobody's going to be able to get that turned around. And plus the leagues don't play head to head, which is a smart thing. You don't want to, that would be problematic, but I'll be interested to watch it. And, that'll be something that we'll probably try to talk about on Monday or Wednesday in one of the tape shows here on the Big Me Kickoff. But I want to make sure that everybody is subscribed to the channel, hit that bell. Don't miss out on a single episode as we're going Monday through Friday. I've accomplished my goal. I have gone 5 times this week, as promised. They say that if you can do something for 2 weeks, it starts to become a habit. So I got 1 more week to go, and I think we'll be able to do it. I probably need to sit there and look at how I'm going to handle my Monday show with my being in Indianapolis at this camp, but that's my problem and not yours. Your homework is to make sure you have a wonderful weekend. Hit that bell, as I said. Don't miss any of our shows here on the Buckeye Huddle channel, including Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning, the Buckeye Weekly Podcast, et cetera, et cetera. And until then, I will see you all on Monday, and have a fantastic weekend.